The first thing I noticed wasn't the lake glittering past the big windows, or the cedar deck I'd paid to have rebuilt the summer before I left. It was my granddaughter standing at the bottom of the stairs in a thin uniform, holding a tray of empty glasses, waiting for permission to move. She was 17 the last time I'd held her. She'd be 22 now. But the young woman by the banister looked closer to 35, hollowed out around the eyes, her wrists too thin for the sleeves of that gray dress somebody had decided was a maid's outfit. And before I tell you what she said when she finally looked up at me, let me say my name plainly, so none of you mistake who was standing in that front hall. I am Adeline Crew. I am 63 years old. That house on the lake outside Bracebridge was bought with 31 years of my own money, and I put it in my granddaughter's name myself, with my own hand, the week before I flew to Halifax to look after my dying sister. So the girl holding that tray was not a servant in somebody else's mansion. She was the owner of it, and she was waiting for permission to set down a tray in her own home. I'd come straight from the airport. I hadn't told anyone the exact day. That was deliberate, though I couldn't have told you why at the time. Call it a feeling. 5 years of phone calls that got shorter and stranger. 5 years of a girl who used to text me 3 times a day, going quiet, then quieter, then sending me birthday messages that read like they'd been copied off a card. I'd told myself she was busy, growing up, building a life. That's what we tell ourselves when the truth is too heavy to pick up. The door had been unlocked. I'd let myself in. And the woman who came out of the kitchen first wasn't my granddaughter. It was a woman about my age. Silver hair, set in a hard helmet of curls, wearing a cashmere wrap I recognized because I left it folded in the cedar chest in the master bedroom. She stopped when she saw me, just for a half second. Then she smoothed her face over the way some people smooth a bed sheet. "Can I help you?" she said. Not a question, a fence. I didn't answer her. I was looking past her at the girl on the stairs. "Hazel," I said. My granddaughter flinched like I'd thrown something. The tray rattled. One of the glasses tipped, and she caught it against her chest with both hands, fast, the way you catch something when dropping it has cost you before. She looked at me, and there was a long, terrible moment where I watched her not know me. Her eyes went over my face the way you read a sign in a language you used to speak, searching, almost finding it, then sliding off. "It's all right," the silver-haired woman said to her, soft as oil. "Take those to the kitchen, dear. We have a guest." Dear, the word landed wrong in my ears. Hazel turned without a word and walked toward the kitchen, and I watched the way she moved. Small, folded inward, her shoulders rounded forward like she was carrying something invisible and heavy across her back. She walked like a woman 3 times her age. She walked like I'd seen women walk in the long-term care wing where my sister spent her last months. Like the body had learned that taking up space gets punished. "I think you've got the wrong house," the woman said. "No," I said. "I don't believe I have." That's when the man came in from the deck. Big, soft in the middle, with the easy slouch of a person who has never once worried about money he didn't earn. He had a beer in one hand, even though it wasn't yet noon. He looked at me the way you look at a flyer somebody's left on your windshield. "Mum," he said to the silver-haired woman, "who's this?" And I understood, in that one word, a good deal of what had happened to my granddaughter in 5 years. Mum. His mother. The 2 of them, here, in the house I'd given Hazel. The cashmere on the older woman's shoulders. The boy's bare feet up on my furniture. The girl in the gray dress carrying their glasses. I didn't shout. I want you to understand that. 63 years had taught me that the loudest person in the room is almost never the most dangerous one. I set my purse down on the side table very calmly, and I took out my phone, and I walked toward the windows where the cell signal off the lake was always strongest. I dialed the only number that mattered. When the line picked up, I didn't say hello. "It's Adeline," I said. "Pull the trust file. The original. Today. If you've ever stood in a room and watched two strangers wearing your dead family's clothes and felt something in your chest go very quiet and very cold, not breaking, the opposite of breaking, drop a small heart in the comments so I know I'm not standing in that front hall by myself. I ended the call. I put the phone back in my bag. Neither of them knew what I'd said meant anything. They just heard an old woman talking on the phone. "Ma'am," the man said, hauling himself off the deck rail, "I don't know who you think you are." "I'm her grandmother," I said. I nodded toward the kitchen. "Hazel's, and I'd like to speak to her, alone." The woman laughed. It was a light, practiced sound, the kind you make at a dinner party when somebody says something a little gauche. "Oh," she said, "you're the grandmother, the one who left." She let that hang. "Hazel's told us all about you. She doesn't really like visitors. She gets overwhelmed. It's better if we manage things for her." We manage things for her. I'd spent 31 years running a wholesale flooring business in a trade full of men who assumed my name on the invoice was somebody's secretary. I knew the sound of a person telling me what was true while they washed my face to see if I'd believe it. I gave her nothing back. I just walked past her toward the kitchen. Hazel was at the sink. She'd set the tray down and she was standing very still, both hands flat on the counter, her head down. When she heard me come in, she went rigid. "Hazel," I said again, quiet now. She turned halfway, wouldn't lift her eyes above my collar. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Please. It's easier if you go. It's easier if you go." My God. The same words, near enough, that I'd heard from women in shelters when I used to drive donations down for the church. The words of somebody who has done the arithmetic and decided that the price of being rescued is higher than the price of staying. I came closer. Slow, the way you come up on a deer at the edge of the road. I could smell her bleach and sweat and something sour underneath, the smell of a body that isn't sleeping or eating right. Up close, I could see the things the dim front hall had hidden. The skin on her knuckles cracked and raw from cold water and harsh soap. A yellow-green smudge along the inside of her forearm where her sleeve had pulled back. Older marks under it, the kind that fade and never quite leave. "Sweetheart," I said. The word came out before I could stop it, and her whole face crumpled for just a second before she pulled it back in. "What is happening to you in this house?" "Nothing. Too fast. I'm fine. She stopped. Her eyes went to the kitchen doorway. I followed them. The woman was standing there, arms crossed, watching us with a pleasant, patient expression like a teacher waiting for two children to finish whispering. "She tires herself out," the woman said. "Don't you, Hazel? She likes to stay busy. It's good for her. Keeps the dark thoughts away." Hazel's head dropped. "I like to stay busy," she repeated in a flat voice that wasn't hers, and I felt the splinter of those words go straight under my ribs. Somebody had written that sentence for her and made her say it so many times that it had worn a groove. I want to tell you about the next part carefully, because it's the part that taught me what I was really dealing with. I asked, gently, if Hazel could walk me out to see the garden. The woman's whole body shifted, just slightly, to put herself between us and the back door. "The garden's a mess," she said. "We haven't had the help in. Why don't you sit and I'll make tea and we can have a nice visit?" Every door I reached for, she was already standing in front of it. That's a thing you learn to see once you've seen it, the friendly face and the body that won't let you pass. So I stopped reaching for doors. I sat down at my own kitchen table in my own house, and I waited, because I'd made one phone call, and I knew that what I'd set in motion when I said, "pull the trust file," was already crossing the water toward this house, and all I had to do was hold the room together for a little while. The son, his name was Dale, I learned, when his mother called it across the kitchen, sat down across from me with his beer and decided to explain my life to me. People like Dale love to explain. "Look," he said, "I get it. You feel some kind of way, coming back, seeing the place run different. but Hazel signed everything over. Fair and square, to Mum mostly, 'cause Mum's the one taking care of her. You were gone, what, 5 years? 6? You don't just get to fly back in and act like you own the place? She signed the house over, I said, to your mother. And the savings, he said, with the pride of a man reciting somebody else's accomplishment. It's all looked after. Hazel doesn't have a head for that stuff. Never did. The savings. I kept my face still. There had been savings, a registered account I'd built up over decades that I'd had transferred into Hazel's name along with the house, so that the girl would never have to do what I'd done, which was beg a bank manager in 1987 to take a woman seriously. A nest egg, gone, apparently, into the hands of a woman in my cashmere. And why, I said, would Hazel give your mother everything she owned? For the first time, Dale looked the smallest bit uncertain. He glanced at his mother, and his mother answered for him, the way she answered for everyone in that house. Because I was dying, she said. She said it beautifully. That's the thing I'll never forget. She said it with a little catch in her voice, one hand drifting up to her chest, her eyes going glassy right on cue. The doctors found something last spring. Hazel, bless her heart, she wanted to make sure I had everything I needed for treatment. Private clinics, the good ones, not the wait list. A small, brave smile. She insisted. I told her no, but she insisted. That girl loves me like her own. And from the doorway, in that same flat, borrowed voice, Hazel said, I wanted to help. Nana was sick. Nana. She called that woman Nana. I have raised a daughter and buried her. I have buried a sister. I sat at that table, and I felt the floor of my own understanding drop away, because I finally saw the shape of the thing whole. It wasn't just that they'd taken the house. They'd taken the girl's idea of who her family was. They'd moved into the empty space I left, and they'd renamed it. Grandmother became the one who left. A stranger became Nana. And my granddaughter, who had no one to check the story against, had simply believed the only people in the room. If you've ever come home too late and found that someone has spent your absence rewriting you into the villain of your own family's story, leave a heart down below, so I know you understand the particular cold of that. I didn't argue it. There was no point arguing a thing that needed proving. Instead, I turned to Hazel, and I made my voice as warm and ordinary as I could, the voice I used to use when she was small and woke up from a bad dream. Hazel, when Nana got sick, did you ever go with her? To the clinic? Did you ever see the doctor yourself? A pause. The woman, Marlene, started to speak. That's enough now. But Hazel answered first, and something in her wanted to answer. I could see it. No, she said slowly. She went on her own. She said the appointments upset me. She said it was better if I stayed home and kept things nice for when she got back. And the money you gave her for the private clinic? Did you ever see a bill? A receipt? She handled all that. Hazel's brow had started to furrow, the way a person's does when a thought they've been forbidden to think starts pushing up anyway. She said I wouldn't understand the medical paperwork. Hazel, Marlene said sharply. How long ago? I said, ignoring her, keeping my eyes on my granddaughter. Did the doctors say she was dying? 1.5 years. Hazel's voice was getting smaller, but the furrow in her brow was getting deeper. Maybe more. I let that sit in the kitchen for a moment. 1.5 years of dying, and the woman in front of me had the glow of someone who ate well and slept soundly and walked 4 kilometers a day. I didn't say it. I let Hazel do the arithmetic herself, because I knew from the women in those shelters that the most important thing was not for me to tell her she'd been fooled. It was for her to discover it standing on her own 2 feet. That was when I heard the cars in the drive. Not 1. 2. The crunch of gravel, doors, and then a knock on the front door that was not the knock of a friend. 3 firm raps. Marlene's head snapped toward the sound. For the first time, the practiced calm slipped, and I saw what was underneath it. And what was underneath it? was fear. "Who is that?" Dale said, standing up too fast, knocking the table so the beer slopped. "That," I said, getting to my feet, "would be my lawyer, and I expect she's brought someone with her." I'll tell you who was at the door. My lawyer, Frances. I won't use her surname, she'd hate it, a small, fierce woman who'd handled my business for 22 years and flew up from Toronto the morning I called her from Halifax, the morning I first got the bad feeling and asked her to quietly start pulling threads. And beside Frances, 2 officers from the Ontario Provincial Police Detachment that covers the Muskoka Lakes, a younger constable and an older one, with a steady, unhurried way about him that I came to be very grateful for. Frances came in first. She took one look at Hazel, at the gray dress, the raw hands, the way the girl had pressed herself back against the kitchen counter, and I watched my lawyer's jaw set. She'd known Hazel as a little girl. She'd drawn up the trust herself. "Adeline," she said, "you were right to call." What happened over the next 2 hours, I could not have scripted, and I would not have wanted to. Because I'd done my part. I'd been the still point. Now other people with badges and seals and the weight of the law behind them, started doing theirs. The older constable, Sergeant, a name I'll keep to myself, asked very gently if he could speak to Hazel apart from the others. Marlene objected at once. Hazel needed support, she said. Hazel got overwhelmed. Hazel would want her Nana there. The sergeant looked at her for a long, quiet moment and said that the young woman was an adult and could decide for herself who she wanted in the room, and that he'd be asking her that question, not Marlene. It was such a small thing. But I watched Hazel's eyes come up off the floor when he said it. Decide for herself. I don't think anyone had told her she was allowed to do that in a long time. They took her into the sunroom. Frances went with her and the younger constable, and while they were gone, the older sergeant stayed in the kitchen with Marlene and Dale and me, and he asked his quiet questions, and I watched the story come apart at the seams. Frances had not come empty-handed. She brought the trust file, the real one, the document I'd signed in her office in 2019, the one that put the house and the savings in Hazel's name, but with conditions. I'd insisted on the conditions. Frances had thought I was being overcautious. She's 18, Adeline. She's not going to get swindled out of a Lakehouse. And I'd said something I'm not proud. I had to know. I'd said, I've watched good women get talked out of everything they own by people who smiled the whole time. I want a tripwire. So we built one, a clause that said any transfer, sale, or assignment of the property or the funds made while I was out of the country and without my written knowledge could be reviewed and reversed if it was found to have been obtained through undue influence, coercion, or fraud. Marlene had documents too. Of course she did. A deed transfer, Hazel's signature on it. A power of attorney over the savings, Hazel's signature again. Frances laid the 2 sets side by side on my kitchen table, Marlene's papers and mine, and the sergeant looked at them. And then he looked at the signatures, and even I, no expert, could see what he saw. The Hazel who'd signed her name on my 2019 trust wrote in a round, confident, looping hand. The Hazel who'd signed away the house wrote like someone holding the pen in a fist, like someone whose hand was being steadied, or rushed, or watched. These were signed when? The sergeant asked. 8 months ago, Marlene said, around when I got my diagnosis. Hazel wanted to make sure everything was taken care of, in case the catch in the voice again, but it landed differently now, in a room full of people writing things down. Which clinic? The younger constable's voice came from the sunroom doorway. He'd stepped out, notebook in hand. You said private clinic. Which one? We'll just need the name for the file. A silence. A long one. I'd have to find the paperwork, Marlene said. Take your time, the sergeant said. He did not sound like a man in a hurry. He sounded like a man who had all afternoon and a great deal of patience, and had done this many, many times. I will not drag you through every minute of it, because the truth of these things is that they're slow and procedural, and the drama is all underneath. But I'll tell you the moment the floor gave way. The younger constable came back out of the sunroom and he asked quietly whether anyone could show him where Hazel slept. A simple question. Marlene said the spare room, top of the stairs. The constable said he'd already been up. The spare room had a made bed and a thin layer of dust on the nightstand, the dust of a room nobody slept in. And Hazel, from the sunroom, in a voice that I heard go through that house like a draft, said, "I sleep in the room off the laundry." I didn't know that house had a room off the laundry. It had been a storage cupboard when it was mine. We went and looked, all of us, and I had to hold the door frame. A camp cot, a space heater because there was no vent, a milk crate with 3 folded shirts in it, a child's nightlight plugged in low to the wall, my granddaughter, 22 years old, sleeping with a nightlight in a cupboard in the house she legally owned, because the dark of a windowless room with a door that didn't lock from the inside had become a thing she needed to soften. The sergeant stood looking at that cot for a while. Then he got on his radio, and he stepped out onto the deck, and his voice came back quieter and harder than before. And I heard the words coercive control and suspected fraud and request a supervisor. And I knew the thing had turned. If you've ever stood outside a tiny room and understood, all at once, exactly how small they'd made the life of someone you love, and felt grief and rage trade places in your chest so fast you couldn't tell them apart, put a heart in the comments. I needed to know I wasn't the only one standing at that door. Here is what they found in the days that followed, because Francis and the OPP financial crimes people kept pulling the threads I'd asked them to start pulling. There was no clinic. There was no diagnosis. There was no doctor, no oncologist, no chemotherapy, no private waitlist jumping treatment. Marlene Hollis had walked into a doctor's office exactly once in the relevant period for a flu shot. The cancer was an invention, start to finish. A story built specifically because it was the one story a tender-hearted girl with no family left to check it against would never refuse. Hazel had sold her own savings, drained the registered account I'd spent 31 years filling, and handed it over for the treatment of an illness that did not exist. And when the money was gone, they'd kept her, because by then keeping her was free, and free labor in a 4-bedroom house on the lake is its own kind of inheritance. The house transfer? Francis established it cleanly, had been signed the same week Hazel had been sick with a real fever, a kidney infection she'd been left to ride out on the cot in the cupboard without a doctor, because a doctor asks questions. They'd put the deed in front of her while she was burning up and frightened and convinced her Nana was dying, and they'd told her that signing it was how a good girl made sure the family was protected. My tripwire clause caught it. 8 months out of the country. No written knowledge from me. A transfer obtained, in the plain language of the document Francis had drafted, through undue influence and fraud. Reversible. Dale Hollis was charged. So was his mother. Fraud over $5,000, which in this country is its own category and a serious one. Forcible confinement. And the charge that mattered most to me, the one the newer parts of the law made possible, they were charged in connection with the coercive control of a vulnerable adult, the slow, deliberate shrinking of a person until she'd forgotten she was allowed to leave. I sat in the gallery for the bail hearing, and I watched a justice of the peace deny Marlene Hollis her request to return to the Lakehouse pending trial. And I watched her face do the thing my granddaughter's face had stopped being able to do. Show all at once exactly how frightened she was. The cashmere wrap had gone back into evidence. She wore the clothes the court gave her. People ask me, the ones who hear this story, whether the money came back. Some of it did. The Financial Crimes Unit traced what hadn't been spent. And the court ordered restitution of the rest, which means it'll trickle back over years, in amounts that will never quite add up to 31 years of a woman's work. The house came back the day Francis filed the reversal and a judge signed it. The deed is in Hazel's name again, clean this time, with a new clause. Francis added that even I had to smile at. This property may not be transferred while Adeline Crew draws breath without Adeline Crew sitting at the table. I'll be at that table a good while yet, I've decided. But I want to end where it mattered, which was not the courtroom. It was the night after they took Marlene and Dale away, the first night when the house was finally quiet and ours again. And I found Hazel standing in the doorway of the master bedroom, her bedroom, by every paper that meant anything, not going in. Just standing, holding the door frame the way I'd held the cupboard door. "You can go in," I told her. "It's yours, sweetheart. It always was." "I don't." She stopped, tried again. "I don't know how to sleep somewhere with a window. I keep thinking I'll be too comfortable and I won't hear when someone needs me." She laughed, a small broken sound that I felt in my own throat. "Isn't that stupid?" "No," I said. "That's not stupid. That's what they did to you. And it's going to take a while to undo, and you don't have to undo it tonight." I sat down on the edge of the bed I'd bought her, in the house I'd built for her, and I patted the space beside me, the way I had when she was 4 and afraid of thunder. She came and sat. She was so thin. I put my arm around her and she went still, the way the abused go still when they're touched, braced for it to become something else. And then, slowly, when it didn't, she let her head come down onto my shoulder. We sat like that a long time. The lake moved against the dock outside. There was a window, and through it the dark wasn't a covered anymore. It was just the night over the water, the way it had always been before any of these people came. "Nana," she started, and then caught herself, and the word that came next she had to reach for, down through 5 years of having it taken from her. "Grandma," she said, "I forgot you." "I know, love," I said. "They worked very hard to make sure you would. That wasn't your fault. Not one bit of it was your fault." She cried then, finally, the way she hadn't let herself in front of any of them, and I held my granddaughter in the house that was hers, and I thought about the woman I'd been at 30, signing for a business loan with a man across the desk who couldn't look me in the eye, and I thought I built every cent of this so that she would never have to be small in front of anyone. And they made her small anyway, but not for good, not for good. "Tomorrow," I told her, when the crying had wound down to breathing, "we're going to get you a doctor, a real one. And then we're going to go out on that dock with 2 cups of tea and you're going to tell me everything you used to want before they made you stop wanting things. We've got time. I'm not going anywhere ever again." She nodded against my shoulder. And after a while, her breathing slowed and went deep and even, the breathing of someone sleeping properly for the first time in longer than either of us wanted to count. And I sat there in the dark by the window and did not move. Because some nights, the most useful thing an old woman can do in this world is simply refuse to leave the room. I keep coming back to one small thing, the nightlight in that cupboard off the laundry. A grown woman, my own Hazel, 22 years old, sleeping with a child's nightlight because the dark of a windowless room had been made into something to fear. Nothing about that happened all at once. That's the part I want you to sit with, because that's the part that matters. Marlene didn't break my granddaughter in a day. She did it the way water shapes stone, one small lie at a time, one borrowed sweater, one appointment Hazel wasn't allowed to attend, one sentence repeated until the girl said it back in a voice that wasn't her own. Cruelty, that patient isn't a fit of temper. It's a plan. And a plan is built on choices, made awake, on purpose, by a person who knew exactly what she was doing. So when people ask me how I got the house back, how the money came back, how those 2 ended up in a courtroom in clothes the court handed them, I tell them the truth, which is less dramatic than they want. It came back because, 31 years ago, I sat across a desk from a banker who wouldn't meet my eyes, and I learned that the world does not protect women who assume good faith. I learned to put a tripwire on everything I loved. That clause Francis thought was overcautious, the one that said, "No one touches this property while I'm out of the country without my written word," that wasn't suspicion. That was me thinking clearly while I still could, planning for a storm on a day the sky was blue. Good sense isn't a feeling. It's the homework you do before you need it. But cleverness alone wouldn't have been enough. I had to walk back into that house and hold still while every instinct screamed at me to grab my granddaughter and run. Holding still when you're terrified. Choosing the long, slow right thing over the fast, satisfying wrong one. That took more out of me than anything in 31 years of business. That's the muscle nobody can lend you. You build it alone, in the rooms where it's hardest. And underneath all of it, the thing I will not apologize for is that I refused to decide my granddaughter was a lost cause. It would have been easier to believe she'd chosen this, to be angry at her instead of for her. I chose the harder, kinder reading of a person who couldn't speak for herself, and that choice is the only reason she let her head fall onto my shoulder that night by the window. If you take one thing from Hazel's story, let it be this. Be the kind of person whose word is good and whose loyalty can't be bought. Plan like someone who has read the fine print of human nature and find, somewhere in yourself, the stubbornness to stay in the room when everything in you wants to leave. Those three things saved a girl I'd nearly lost. They'll do more for you than luck ever will.